come here to Sudbury in Suffolk, and I've come here to introduce the Albion Accord archive. Well, what is the Albion Accord archive? It's something that no one really would have heard of until just a few months ago. This archive was amassed by Robin St George, an amateur collector of art, and he put together the collection from artists really across the southern part of England. The home counties, East Anglia. And these artists were what, by today's standards, I suppose, would be called sound artists, although there's no documentary evidence to say that that name was ever used, and they never used it themselves in their writing. They were a loose group of artists, sometimes working in collaboration, sometimes working alone, sometimes not even known to each other, but have become known as the Albion Accord through their cooperative ways of working and the kind of work that they were doing. Fundamental to the kind of work that they were doing was a sense of place, a genus loci, as Paul Nash would call it. And deep inside the work that they were doing always was this rootedness, this connectedness to place and a sense of place and their sense of place within the work they were doing. It was a kind of dialogue for many of them between the landscape, between location and their finished pieces. Well, hello and welcome to the St George Archive. As you can see, there are some pieces from the archive here that have now been released by the archivists that are safe to handle, and it just gives a cross-section of some of the artists that I'll be discussing in this film. We can see some maps here, some photographs and cassettes as well, and I'll be having a closer look at those a little bit later. We can see some photographs here of Giselle Fortune, Robin St George himself. Now, these are very rare photographs and there's been very little photographic evidence of him so far. We have some images of Spike Wilson, Brickwell Runnerby, his house and the area in which he lived, Livingstone D'Angelo. We think these are Livingstone D'Angelo, but they're yet to be confirmed. It's looking as though that probably is. These two maps here that you see, these are maps that were used by Brickwell Runnerby, particularly for his scatter poems, and we'll be looking a little bit in detail later about how he put these together and what kind of ideas he had while he was doing it. Some postcards from his collection here, and this is a selection of black and white photographs that we believe are Brickwell Runnerby, but they need to be confirmed. But they're very interesting, and they do confirm stories that he was very interested in sailing and used to spend a lot of time on the Norfolk Broads. This part of cassettes here, these are from Livingstone D'Angelo. There's estimated to be about 400 of these, all very similar, all unmarked except for a number. Now, there are some books, some very delicate books, which have number references on, and the archivists believe that as time progresses they are going to be able to synchronise, I suppose you could say, the information from the notebooks with the cassettes. But we'll be having a listen to some of those as well. And in the little box over there are some cassettes that Spike Wilson used with his feedback, electric guitar, and in fact some organ recordings which nobody ever knew about before. Well, we've seen how rare and unusual this archive is, and it's probably quite interesting to speak to the actual archivist at the moment who's responsible for curating and restoring most of this archive. Let's have a word now with the Honourable Mercedes Sutherland Nash.
I was asked to become involved because of my work as archivist and historian of late 20th century art. And so I went along purely in a consultative capacity, really, to start off with and have a look at what there was, and it was hard to know quite what there was, really. You know, it was just a huge amount of material and totally uncollated. I mean, you know, it simply took forever to try and get any sense of it at all. But once we did start to look at it and to get a sense of it, it became very apparent that there was something there that was very, very exciting and that hadn't been seen before.
Well, we've had a good look at the archive and we've seen the kind of contents that it contains. Let's now have a closer look at some of the artists that are actually in that archive, and we'll begin by looking at the work of Giselle Fortune. Well, here I am down in West Sussex, and I'm at the Nettle Patch Herbal Retreat, which is a herbal retreat run by Electra Fortune, the half-sister of Giselle. Until I rang her a couple of months ago, Electra didn't know anything about this archive, and she's obviously very thrilled to find out about it. I brought down some recordings, some drawings of the guitars and things, and she's going to fill us in with some background information, and I'm sure it'll be very exciting.
Of course, we fell in love with it. We fell in love with the whole hippie scene in the 60s. I was 16, Giselle was a bit older than me. She kind of got more into it than I did, more into the music. But yeah, it's all down to our dad that we got introduced to that scene.
And when you say she got into the music a bit more than you did, can you expand on that? What kind of things she was doing?
Well, Giselle was a musician. I wasn't, so I liked the music, but she also loved living down here in Sussex and all the countryside, and she got very interested in linking the countryside and her music. So she was very experimental. She got together with groups of people doing very experimental improvised music and making sounds. So she was in a slightly different group of friends from me, partly due to our interests and the age difference. I was slightly in awe of her friends because they were doing things I didn't quite get. So she thought that the earth could speak to us. And so she was always off in a field communing with nature and doing things with, not really with instruments, but just making sounds.
Well, I'm here on the banks of the River Spume in Stapleton Bottom in West Sussex, and this is one of Giselle Fortune's favourite locations, actually. Some people have said that she would spend 2, 3, 4 days at a time camped here, just basic food, basic protection from the weather. And she would listen to the river, she would commune with the river, and it's also typical here. Obviously we've got these set up here, these sticks and things. This was another idea of hers that she was very, very, very passionate about, was found instruments, and particularly trying to make a way with fire. Particularly in autumn as it is now, she would use these old sticks, make fires, and try to record the sounds, a sort of onomatopoeic poetry, I suppose you could say, that she was making with these fires, big, small fires, different types of wood. She would record these in great detail to try and get an idea of how nature was talking to us and how we could listen. Giselle Fortune's wind guitar was one of the first pieces from the archive to be restored, and here are some of the original plans for that guitar that she made, sketches really, I suppose you could say. But the wind guitar is now fully functioning, and let's take a look at it in situ. Well, we're here now in the Robin St George archive, the courtyard at the back of the archive, and as you can see, Giselle Fortune's wind guitar is set up, and what we're going to do now is get some of the assistants to connect her to some electricity, and then we can have a listen to exactly the kind of sounds that this magnificent machine makes.
Of course, one of the most exciting finds for me was all the material relating to Breakwell Runaby, who I had come across in reference to various other people. I knew that he was part of the poetry scene at that time, but he was a very enigmatic figure. I'd never really got a sense of exactly what it was that he wrote about, and it turned out that he was working in a completely different sort of way It wasn't a conventional poet at all, and all of the material that we found really shed such a lot of light on his working methods. And he was really, a very early sound poet.
Now, Blakewell Runaby I never met, but my sister talked about him a lot. And I know that all the women that we were friendly with really owed a lot to him, because it was really down to him that they got opportunities to play music. They performed poetry, they did a lot of performance art. It was down to him that the women got the opportunity, because it was a very male-dominated society. It shouldn't have been in the 60s, but it still was. And women just found it really hard to break into that. And he was crucial to them getting those opportunities. As I say, I never met him.
I've been invited here to the house of DJ Sugarlips in East London, and she's going to be telling us a little bit about her knowledge of the great man Breakwell Runaby.
I was best friends with Breakwell Runaby's daughter, Saffron. Saffron and I went to school together, and we were thick as thieves. We used to hang out a lot in the summer holidays together, and we used to go record shopping, and Breakwell, or Mr. Runaby as I called him at the time, was very, very encouraging to us in our love of music and the way that we wanted to spend all our pocket money on buying new records. And we'd come home. I used to hang around at their house a lot. We used to hang around and play records, and we used to all end up dancing around the house, even Mr. Runaby himself, who fascinated me at the time. He used to have maps he looked at, he used to have lots of papers that he cut up, and he was always doing something, creating things, and I was never quite sure what he was creating at the time.
What he would do is he would organise these walks. He would pre-plan a route, and he would just plan it not necessarily from its comfort of getting around, but simply because it looked interesting on the map or it passed places of interest. And he would take pieces of paper, notes and things that he had got from guidebooks, maps and other sources of material for the area, more sort of topographical information, I suppose. He would cut these usually into words, sometimes into syllables even. And he would drop these as he walked around on his circular walk. What he would then do, once he'd completed the circuit, was then walk around the system again, picking up pieces that he'd found. Sometimes many went missing in winds, as you can see, a little bit like this. They would scatter, and he would pick up these pieces and then assemble them, sometimes in the order that he picked them up in, sometimes in alphabetical order. He had various different methods of putting these together, and then he would make a poem. He would construct a poem from the pieces that he had found. Let's get an idea now about the kind of context that Breakwell Runaby was working in.
I think the context about all of this is that a lot of people disappeared. But there's been this long period of them being forgotten. And Dom Sylvester Hoodard, was an incredibly original, erudite, prolific man who was connected to many important artists and thinkers of the time. So if somebody like that can disappear for decades, effectively, then the people you're talking about, it's no wonder they disappear.
Yeah, I've been asked to record this gig at the Plough in Stockwell. Spike was doing some stuff there. There was a whole bunch of people on. It was fairly informal, And Breakwell Runaby was there. Spike had invited him down. So I was setting up, and Breakwell arrived, and didn't want to know when he knew it was going to be recorded. That just wasn't his thing, so he didn't do the gig.
Well, that was a fascinating insight into the work of Breakwell Runneby. Runneby, as we've discovered, was notorious for not wanting any records of his work kept. Gigs, poetry festivals that he would attend, he was fastidious about not having any of these recorded, and as we've seen, would walk out if there was a chance that they were going to be recorded. So there's no audio that we can play from the time, but let's hear one of his poems now, and this is dedicated to Gainsborough, Thomas Gainsborough, an artist that he particularly loved, local to him in Sudbury, and this is called Gainsborough's Circle. Cut, buttercup, trowel, ard, mat, clay, head, trip, cable, country, stee, admiral, tower, tom, bray, io, passer, felt, pylon, path, Thomas, ening, clap, pargeting, uno, trust, ord, decor, ing, Sudbury, reeve, babble, smeen, tapox, ord, two, knife, under, elec, tor, Gainsborough, bow, mix. Well, that lovely short piece there, Gainsborough's Circle. So that's a nice, interesting insight into Breakwell Runneby. Let's move on now to another artist. Let's move on to the work of Spike Wilson.
I knew a lot of people that were playing with him at the time. I had some great reports. He was a fantastically creative player, and I really got off on that. I was hoping that one day we would actually do some work together. This album, Live at the ICA, which is like kind of one of the final performances that I did with the quintet at the Institute of Contemporary Arts in 1971, which is kind of going way back now. Because we were in a similar headspace but different, I thought this would be great. We'll just do this gig together and see how it goes. So this would be fantastic, and it was all there. We spoke at length about what we would do, because it's all recorded live, and 1971, there wasn't a second chance of overdubs or anything like that, so it was all going to be all live, straight down to a 2-track machine. And we had a little sound check, we got to the sound check, and we were waiting, and Spike didn't turn up. Those people who don't know won't hear the gap on it, but of course we knew that there's certain things he should be playing we had to do, so we had to quickly do that. But we knew there was a gap, so basically the photo should have him kind of there, but or wherever he would kind of stand, I guess, but missing person. There you are. So it's a shame, but very, very creative. Spike was a very creative person.
What have we got here? Continuous organ. This is quite interesting actually, because the archivists have found now evidence that he was a keyboard player, and it's suggested, some research has been done, that he used to play in church. Some tracks that he's made up here: Cowhead, Twank, Collarbone, Itchy Itch, Brain Fuzz, Stop and Go. Sounds really rather 60s, I suppose.
And Spike used to wander in. Don't know how he knew everybody, but he used to wander in, and he'd be in there just taking amps apart and wiring things together and just messing around. And it was normal. People were in and out the whole time. And then a few months later, I guess, after I first met him, he was. I was in Studio One. I was recording with Cryogenics. And we were in Studio 1, the big studio, and Studio 3 was at the end of the corridor. and no one was booked in. So Keith had said that Spike could go in there and play, I guess. And we came out after a few hours. I mean, we've been in there for weeks, and one day we just came out and there was this noise, incredible noise, just echoing down the corridor. And all the guys were like, wow, what the hell's that, you know? And we walked down, we didn't know Spike was in there, we walked down, went into Studio 3, and he was just in there with just like this little amp and his guitar, and it was just unbelievable. And it was ridiculous because, you know, the guys from Cryogenics, you know, they had all this equipment, they've been trying to make this massive album of noise, and it, you know, they just gave up and went home after that.
Is there anybody else in the archive that you'd want to bring to our attention?
Well, one of the other artists in the exhibition is Livingstone D'Angelo, who created a lot of tapes, a huge amount of tapes actually, of telephone conversation recordings. His mother used to work in a Lewisham telephone exchange, and even before he started making these recordings, he was very interested in putting together material on cassettes, and we've got some material of his from the 1970s, but this particular cache of materials from about 1975, 1976. When his mother used to let him in, really, you know, shouldn't have done this, but she used to let him into the telephone exchange when she was working there, and he used to record some of these telephone conversations, and well, a great many of them. I mean, there are just hundreds and hundreds of these tapes, and you know, we've only got a few that are actually finished. But what, you know, I mean, there's so much material there. You can only wonder, you know, what it would have been, how it would have been if he'd carried on developing this theme, this idea.
Sorry, anti-American political motive, or even more. Sorry, does something more wealthier knowledge against text, and they spent. Static. Knowledge. They spent. It's striking because yes, I mean what's happening.
Did you do any work with Livingstone D'Angelo? Did you know him at all?
Oh, that's that guy who did the cut-up tape thing, wasn't it?
That's right.
No, never met him. I heard about some stuff he did with Millstone, where they were going to, or whether they did it, I don't remember, do some stuff in the middle of a track, a bit like Fairport used Bruce Lacey. But no, never met him.
When I was growing up, when I was a teenager, I was very involved in tape culture. In a sense, long before the internet, what many people would do was swap tapes with each other. And you could even buy them in stores. You go to stores and have all these cassettes that people would make at home. And we used to copy them. And friends used to copy these tapes. And one of these tapes that came through, a connection of another connection, was this D'Angelo character. In some ways, because there wasn't that much known about him, it's difficult to know, was he real or not even at the time. It wasn't the way of finding out what kind of work they were doing, you know, how much production there was or anything. But the recordings really intrigued me. These recordings of these voices recorded. Who were these people? Where did they come from? These kinds of questions were always coming out from it. And you never knew whether it was somebody who was recording their friends and just pretending, or it really was these recordings from this exchange. And in fact, you know, when you listen to them, you realise they are very real. They have to be real. There's no way that somebody could fake that level of authenticity in a way. So there were stories I'd heard that actually he began collaborating with other artists. You know, I'd heard maybe of the BBC Radiophonic Workshop connection, whether that was true or not, I'm never sure. But there were stories also running that he connected with his DJs. They were putting shows on. Now the shows at the time obviously were things like Northern Soul, kind of early disco days in a sense for lots of people. This was a character who came in and just turned the whole thing on its head and actually set up tape machines, tape loops, all kinds of things, and cut tape live in performance. You'd have these kind of quite funky tracks playing, these voices would be cut into it, this guy would kind of be, I suppose in a way, an early form of DJing with tape recorders in a way. But then he'd actually deconstruct it, so you'd actually have the performances without the beats. And I think that's what they were doing. As far as I know, they were taking the actual music side away more and pushing more the kind of D'Angelo side, so the more abstract stuff came through. And for me, the very idea, though I've never heard these recordings, of somebody being in a disco, hearing this music and they're doing their bad 70s dancing in their bad flares, and suddenly the music becomes more and more abstract with these tape cut-ups and loops and deconstructions. It's just a fantastic idea.
And gradually, towards the end of the 70s, as the fashion changed and society became more materialistic, and the Thatcher government came in and people became interested in money and aspirational lifestyle, and all of that was forgotten. And I think now younger artists in particular look back to that period and some of the characters from that period, like Bruce Lacey or like Gustav Metzger or like John Latham, and think, you know, that was a model of how to do things.